Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting order for the Corporation of the Township of Portsmouth on January 18th, 2023. Let's start with roll call. Councilor Lewis. Yes. President. Councilor Bailey.
Present.
Councilor Hurst. Present. And Councilor Goya.
Present.
And we now begin our moment of reflection. That concludes our moment of reflection. So we actually have a resolution for the confirmation of agenda.
The council approves the January 18th, 2023 agenda as circulated, and the council approves the addition to the agenda as follows. Consent item 6.1.8, questions repeating council seeking additional information and the corresponding responses provided by staff.
Councilor Hurst, any comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. All right, I'm going to ask this box 3 resolution. We're going to change up the order of the agenda. Today we're just going to go ahead and close down after we have our delegate present from conservation.
The council approves the revision to the order of business for the January 18th, 2023 council agenda.
Please, close anyway. Mr. Daly, all in favor? That's carried. Let's go to the first written delegation. Disclosure, did you do that? Sorry. I scratched it out with the family disclosure of pecuniary interests.
No.
There we go. Thank you. Les, is there any councilors have items on the consent agenda to pull out? Oh, just one. All right, we'll look at those. Sorry, my watch already said come apply. We'll start with the CO.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. We are just having a bit of a hard time hearing you properly. I'm not sure if there is an issue on anybody else's end. Is Hassan asked to start the presentation?
Yes, how is it now? Can you hear me now?
Just very faded. I'm so sorry. I think it's just your microphone. The other people, we can hear them okay.
How's that?
That's much better. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Well, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning, members of council. It's nice to see everybody this morning, and thank you for having me to present to you this morning, as we do at least once a year with our budget presentations. My name is Hassan Bassett. I'm the CEO of Conservation Halton, and Adriana Berza is on as well, and I may be joined shortly by Marnie Piggott, our Director of Finance as well. So Adriana, if we can bring up the presentation.
If the clerk would be so kind to give me access to share, that would be lovely. Please let me know if you can see it, okay?
Yes, thanks. If you could click through to the first slide. I know you have this presentation in front of you, or I would imagine you do in your package. So I won't spend a lot of time on all of this, but I'll be here to answer any questions should you have them. This slide gives you, at a glance, it shows you the scale and scope of Conservation Halton as an organization, what we do, and more importantly, our impact, the services that we provide. So we cover quite a large area within our watershed. We serve a large population. We have exceptional visitation at our parks. It was 1.3 million last year. We expect it to stabilize somewhere between there and 1 million customers a year once the pandemic bump, if we can call it that, starts to go away and people have more opportunities to visit other places. We have $42.5 million. Those are annual revenues, or that's our annual budget. We have 145 full-time staff, 850 seasonal staff. The next number I think is important, $4.8 million in seasonal wages that we pay those seasonal staff. None of those wages are generated through tax levies. They are all generated through user fees. And I think it's important to reiterate that Conservation Halton's parks are not subsidized in any way by any tax dollars, not municipal, not provincial. They are operated completely separate from our municipal levies. Both operating and infrastructure costs, capital costs, asset replacement costs, everything is off the tax levy when it comes to CH Parks. We are quite busy with our permits and planning. We have standards that we try and maintain with our turnaround times. You can see them there. We do a lot. One of our key priorities as a conservation authority is, of course, our focus on hazards and flooding. And we made this a priority several years ago in our strategic plan. We've treated it as if it were a priority. That's where our efforts have gone. That's where our capital dollars have gone. That's where a lot of the technology emphasis has been, is ensuring that we can provide good programs and services when it comes to that responsibility of dealing with flood hazards. So you can see some of the statistics there in terms of how we continue to expand our ability to monitor weather conditions locally, and more importantly, to model what that weather will do on the landscape, because that is the more important role that a conservation authority has. You can get a forecast in terms of what is going to happen from multiple sources, including the weather network, but what is that actually going to do on the landscape is where a conservation authority needs to excel. In addition to doing that, of course, we manage infrastructure related to flooding. We have 4 dams and 3 channels that go through some of our major urban centers. We're responsible for maintaining them, managing them, operating them throughout the year. We've got a huge emphasis on environmental monitoring as well. This is what generates the baseline data. It's used by developers, it's used by consultants, it's used by all levels of government, from the federal, provincial, municipal, and it's used by ourselves as well to keep our finger on the pulse and get a cohesive picture of what is happening within our watershed. Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? Based on that data, one of the actions or outcomes that we can take is to look at where we might strategically intervene through restoration or stewardship projects, or even to pinpoint finer causes of data variance where we can collect more data for a period of time. And so environmental monitoring is very, very important. Without knowing what you have and in which direction things are moving, it's very difficult to know what the causes might be and what a potential solution might be. And then lastly, hazard trees, both the removal, but also replenishing our forest canopy through plantations and restoring creek habitats. You can go to the next slide, please.
Before I move to the next slide, with your permission, Hassan, if I could have the clerk let Marnie Piggott, our Director of Finance, into the panelist room so she can answer any questions at question period from council. Thank you so much.
Thanks. If you can go to the next slide. Hamilton Council made a request last week that as I do my budget presentation, that provide them with a brief overview of what has changed in Bill 23 in relation to how CAs function. So I've left this in my presentation in case you have any questions on this as well. I won't spend any time on it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the impacts of Bill 23 on the services that conservation authorities provide our municipalities. So it's there should you have questions. If we can click through to the next slide, Adriana. I do invite you to look at our strategic plan on our website. It's called Momentum, and it very clearly lays out what the priorities are, how we're focusing on them, and then what is our outcome every single year against those priorities in a very tangible, measurable way. One of the changes that the province made in terms of how conservation authorities structure their programs, what buckets they put them in, and how municipalities are to be asked for, areas where they are mandatory services and areas where an MOU or an agreement with municipalities is required. Those requirements come in, at the end of this year. So when you see our budgets next year, they will fall into these categories of category 1, 2, and 3, 1 being mandatory, 2 and 3 being those that require agreements. We've already started to pivot to those categories at CH, and so everything that the Conservation Authority does today falls in these categories: permitting and planning, get natural hazards and watershed management, conservation, lands and recreation, and of course the corporate services you need to sustain all of those. So if you can go ahead, Adriana, I'll start very briefly with just highlights on each of those. I think it's important with post municipal elections and all the changes on the provincial side for me to at least try and demonstrate what do these things actually mean on the ground in terms of the services we provide and the impact, rather than just jargon and terminology. So I'll spend a few minutes going through each very quickly. So if you can click through, please. So this is, as the name suggests, probably the easiest one to understand. This is where we have permitting and planning. Permitting is under the Conservation Authorities Act, and plan review is where we provide services on behalf of the municipalities. And that's one of the areas that's been impacted by Bill 23. We saw a huge increase, or a significant increase. There's an increase year on year in our watershed, which I'm sure will be not a surprise to you, but there was a big bump last year as well in terms of the applications, the reviews that we had to conduct, and we maintained and in fact exceeded our service standards in many areas. So that's what I'd like to highlight on that. If you go to the next slide, we'll move into the natural hazards and watershed management. And this is composed of 3 smaller areas, or 3 sub areas of focus. As I mentioned earlier, there's flood forecasting and operations. You need to have that very basic service in order to look at natural hazards. And then from that, you need to look at watershed strategies and climate mitigation. So all of that data you collect, everything that you see, what are you going to do with it? And a watershed-based strategy is the best vehicle to look at what is the data telling you. And that is the space where we partner with municipalities in that middle bubble. And then restoration and conservation can be the outcomes of that watershed strategy. Where do we restore a wetland? Where do we restore a creek? Where do we put in riparian plantings? Where are we seeing erosion efforts? Now, a lot of these things occur on public lands, municipally owned lands in most cases. That's where our restoration projects go. And in some cases, through our stewardship project, we also work with private landowners where there can be a significant impact, and you have a willing landowner who's interested in taking action on their property. So that all of that together is what makes us resilient against natural hazards. It is not just dependent on permits being issued to keep people out of hazard lands. And it's certainly not dependent on just managing dams that were built in the 60s. That's why CAs were structured on a watershed basis. You carry out restoration, stewardship, and monitoring in areas that maybe are more cost-effective and more impactful than just man-made solutions to weather these hazards. And with climate change, the importance of working at a slightly larger scale is growing year by year. If you go to the next slide, Adriana, just to show you the value, the replacement cost of the assets that we own at the Conservation Authority is about $310 million. They require annual investment of about $1.13 million to ensure that they deliver the service that they're delivering and maintain them in a state of good repair. And that underscores, when you rely so much on man-made infrastructure, that there's a huge cost, and that cost goes up every single year. It never goes down. We have been very disciplined with our asset management strategies and our funding strategy with Halton Region, and we expect to achieve our target levels for those reserves by 2028. We contribute to them every year, have done so for a number of years, where we will have the funding in there to ensure that we can, spend those annual life cycle dollars to maintain these assets without causing big bumps in our budget on any given year. If you go to the next slide, I don't have in this PowerPoint the before, but if you were to look at these assets 5 or 6 years ago, these were not the grades that were there, not across the board. They are much better now. This is exactly what you want out of your dams. You need them to be good or very good. You don't need them to be excellent. Good does the job, and that's where we've brought all of them. You can see along the left y-axis that it's not just structural improvements, it's everything else that needs to go into ensuring that our dams are doing the job that they're supposed to do. So for me and for our board, this is a very good news story. We made it a priority, and we've turned the condition around of these assets. And if you can go to the next slide, Adriana will show you our channels as well. Channels, the way we've inherited them, are massive concrete lined drainage ditches, I suppose, through our municipalities. This is where creeks were lined with concrete in the 60s. We have to maintain them, and this is a little bit like your experience on the 401. It's constantly under construction, and that's how channels are maintained as well. We have georeferencing for each slab, and every year we continue to renew those slabs. And we'll just continue to do that in perpetuity, and the channels will continue to do their job. They will never look pretty, but they will do their job, at least the job they were designed to do. We have a good emphasis on project management and ensure that all of our targets are met with regards to repair, that they're within scope, within budget, and on schedule. So there's a good news story there. That last stat there, 70% of our watershed is now covered by real-time rain gauge climate stations. We have intelligence, on 100% of the watershed, but we really wanted to have these real-time gauges so you can look at local conditions, and we continue to add every year. A lot of these are added in partnership with the municipality. So the municipality may have had a rain gauge on, the local ice rink or the local library or town hall. And what we've done is we've sort of turned it into a smart rain gauge and digitized it, upgraded it if need be. And now we have access to all of that data that we can put into our models, and the municipalities are given real-time access to that data as well through our platform. If you can go to the next slide. Other improvements in technology are being brought in every year. That's all I'll say on this slide, including enhanced ice monitoring program that we're working on as well. If you can go to the next slide. On the restoration side, I continue to be impressed by the work that our staff can do, and how they can take what is about 600,000 in municipal dollars that go into these programs and turn them into $3.3 million of cash that's invested. And I do want to say all of this is invested on public lands. Many of these are in municipal parks and other municipal properties. So a good conservation authority continues to be very industrious and serve as that secretariat where we can take a small contribution and then amplify its impact, and then actually carry out all of the work and know that the work we're carrying out is done based on science, and it has an actual benefit for residents upstream and downstream. If you can go to the next slide. I put this map up just so you can see the spread of those projects that are carried out in a given year. So this is 1 year's worth of restoration projects that are all across the watershed. Moving on to conservation lands. You can click through, Adriana. So we had a record-breaking year in 2022. More people than ever spent time in nature, over 3 million hours were spent experiencing our parks by our visitors. Over 6 million kilometers of trails were walked by the visitors. We're very proud of the fact that more people than ever learned to ski at Glen Eden, including programs for new Canadians, more kids than ever in our camps. Over 3,000 campers, 120,000 hours spent by kids aged 4 to 15 over a few weeks in Conservation Halton parks. We provide bus service as well to and from our camps every day, which makes it very easy for parents to drop their kids off. They can pick a spot within their local municipality and do so. And we continue to ensure that our programs, our staff, our recruitment philosophy, our culture continues to reflect the changing demographics of our community. We continue to look at accessibility. We installed our first fully accessible trail at Area 8 from the parking lot all across the lake and back to the parking lot. And so we have ambitious internal goals to ensure we remove as many barriers as we can diligently. We can go to the next slide, Adriana. We're dealing with some of the same factors that you would be at a municipality as well. Aging infrastructure, population growth means more opportunity. It's not a bad thing, more opportunity, but also more demand for our spaces. Changing demographics as well. And then, of course, economic uncertainty. Climate change is a huge factor. And just look out your window today and spare a thought for those of us who run a ski hill. It hasn't looked very good at all. We lost out on all of Christmas, which is, if you don't get Christmas and you don't get March break, it's not worth running a ski operation in this part of the province. But it's fully open. The staff are miracle workers, and we'll see how the rest of the season goes. Our key thing is to get our 8-week lessons programs in. That's most important. That's where all the kids are. That's where we don't want to disappoint anybody. So we prioritized opening those areas of the skill where kids learn to ski. But I think as of today, the entire operation is up and running. But let's hope that we get at least some natural snow this winter. More to put people into the spirit of skiing than anything else. We engage in a lot of foresight planning. We don't want to be reactive to being out of touch with the pace at which these factors above are changing. So ourselves, the senior leadership team on the board, spend a lot of time in that space. We are always open to partnerships with municipalities. We value them a lot, and we're very happy to partner on so many initiatives with our municipalities, and they can be done on bilateral basis as well. We don't have to have a partnership that must work for all 7 or 8 municipalities we serve. Each is different, and there may be value in partnering. If you can go to the next slide, please, Adriana. In terms of land management, that's the other side of recreation. We continue to identify opportunities for growth and expansion. We look at our master plans, update them. We have to get them approved through the NEC and through at the regional level as well. We're assessing some passive rec opportunities on an additional 2,600 acres of CH-owned lands. And as landowners, we're also dealing with other issues, of encroachment and risk management and liability. And all of these issues are increasing because a lot of our land holdings are getting surrounded by more and more urbanization, right? There are more people living very, very close to them. And so the nature of how we manage the risk on those properties has changed in a very massive way over the last 5 or 6 years. It's very different to have a 50-acre nature reserve or regeneration site that's in a rural area, and then it's surrounded by a subdivision in 10 years. You have very different challenges as a landowner. So we're working through those as well. And then we work a lot with our university and academic partners in terms of research and monitoring. And it really underscores the value of preserving these landscapes forever, because they they allow for that kind of research to take place because they're undisturbed. You can go to the next slide, please. Just some examples of the land management that we undertake. We monitor forest health for invasive species, and that list continues to grow, and the cost of managing them continues to grow. The hazards they pose, through the damage they inflict on trees, continues to grow. So if anybody is seeing the true cost of climate change and invasive species on this one specific area, it's people like ourselves who manage trails and forest tracts. But again, we try and invest in that proactive forest management. It's great to plant trees. We plant, as you saw, anywhere from 70 to 100,000 every year. But it's going to take a very long time for a tree that's planted today to be able to provide the goods and services that a tree provides. And it's going to take a lot of luck as well for that tree to grow and survive. It is in fact a lot easier to maintain and manage and invest in the forests that we already have. But I always feel that there's an overemphasis on dollars and funding for planting trees and almost nothing for managing the forests that are already doing the job that we want the new trees to do. So CH continues to invest as well as we can in managing our woodlots and our forests. And we have an arborists team that works through that 365 days a year. We also offer some of those services to private landowners as well through the Managed Forest Tax Incentive Program and a few other very specific programs in certain areas based on funding. You can go to the next slide, please. And finally, corporate services. Our emphasis is to be able to serve our residents as well as we can. And to do that, we need top talent. We need people to pick CH as a place to work and grow their careers, and we try and do what we can there. It's not just a recruitment effort; it's also our emerging leaders program, where we take a lot of young employees and invest in their talent and their skills. It's our work on EDI, which is getting embedded more and more every day in everything that we do at CH. And then we have good brand equity. We do surveys, every single visitor, including myself. Every time I access the park, I get an email asking me how I felt they did. And I always say, don't ask me. I'm part of the crew, but it shows me the discipline they have, and that data is presented all the way up. It's the red flags that the team really focuses on, and they're always minor. But removing those niggles for people walking in their shoes, that's, I think, one of the big reasons why people enjoy their interactions with CH at our park. So we'll continue to focus on that. We have a large presence online, a trusted brand, and that's more motivation than anything, is to maintain that trust that people put in us, because it can go away very quickly. So while we emphasize growth because we need to, a growing population, we emphasize quality even more. You can go to the next slide, Adriana. Thank you. A lot of technology work taking place at CH. All of these things are technologies that we've developed. We didn't buy them off the shelf. In most cases, our smart enterprise tracking solution was built in-house. You see a small snippet of it. This is basically where we track everything against our strategy. It's real time. Staff make their inputs, and then you can look at where you stand. You can click through on anything and go right down to field notes to know why something is off track, or if there's an issue, or something needs to be flagged. So that's how we ensure that we all have a good line of sight on how the organization's doing every day. Because if you do, then you know where problems are starting to brew and how you can alleviate those. Those channels that I mentioned, you can see a picture of them there. We've just started using drone technology to fly those channels, which has made it incredibly efficient to do. And we're working on software where a hairline crack can be detected through imagery, and then using machine learning algorithms. Every time you fly it, the picture that it takes is compared to the pictures of that spot in previous years. and the algorithm can detect if a crack has in fact grown or not. There are lots of surface cracks in concrete, as you know, if you look at your garage floor, most of them are inconsequential. So to know, what to repair. In the past, this meant human effort, walking all of these channels, and now you can get much more data by using this automated drone program. And you don't actually have to fly it. It learns the path once, and then you just kind of let it out of the box and it does its route and comes back and uploads the data, and the software on the other end is what we're working on, which can analyze all of that data and tell us here are the slabs that are of concern, and then we ground truth it, and we're more efficient with the way we do it. And then of course our smart parks initiative continues to grow with our reservation system and other things. So if you can go to the next slide, Adriana, thank you. Just very quickly through the budget summary. Again, you have these numbers. These are some of the drivers and priorities: inflation, population growth, changes to the CA Act, and the need to modernize and renew our infrastructure are still driving our budgets. If you go to the next slide, please. So we have a municipal general levy increase of 4.7% at CH. One of our strategic priorities is to keep our budget increases at or below municipal guidelines, as you'll see in a few slides, with vast majority, the biggest portion of our levy, about 90% coming from Halton Region. That's where we have to put the effort into ensuring that we stay within the guidelines that Halton Region gives us. They are the guidelines most reflective of our needs. They factor in assessment growth and they factor in inflation. So Halton Region's guidelines were 4.7%, and we're within those, and as you can tell, we're below the rate of inflation as well. Our total budget's increasing by more than that, but the municipal portion is increasing by 4.7. You can go to the next slide. So this shows you the difference in our budget, total expenses, total revenues, 40 million last year, 42.5 million this year, an increase of 2.3 million, but that's to the overall budget. The tax supported budget is increasing by a lot less. If you can go to the next slide, Adriana. So this shows you the actual dollar value of the municipal funding, both in terms of our operating capital and our state of good repair levy that I mentioned earlier, where we're trying to get it fully funded by 2028. And so as you can see, even though the total budget at CH is increasing by 2.3 million, the municipal levy is increasing by about $500,000 overall on the $42 million budget. And I'll show you what the apportionment is of that. So we received these numbers from the province, from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, or I suppose this year from the Ministry of Natural Resources, because we've been shifted back to being under their umbrella. And this is based on the CVA for each municipality and the proportion of that municipality that's within the watershed of a conservation authority. So these are numbers that are given to us. We take these percentages, apply them to the total municipal levy, and that's how you end up with those numbers. If the percentage for Puss Lynch is higher than the others, it's because your apportionment went up from last year to this year, as according to the province. The total increase in your funding from 2022 to 2023 is $1,200, but the percentage, I just wanted to address why it's 5.4 for Puss Lynch. It's not something that CH does. This is just how you're being assessed by the province. You can go to the next slide. Even with that increase, I wanted to lay out clearly what is driving that increase. We're not introducing new services programs. It's not the year to do that with all of the pressures on everybody. So our increase is driven by compensation increases, the state of good repair levy, municipal capital, and a little bit of reduction in debt charges. We are offsetting a lot of the increases. So what I'm trying to say is the $364,000 increase you see for compensation is not the total increase driven by compensation. We're offsetting a lot of that using reserves. And of course, any increases on the side of parks are not part of the municipal levy to begin with. So CH has done what we can to use our reserves this year to try and feather some of these increases in and keep our increase to within Halton Region's guidelines at 4.7. If you can go to the next slide. This shows you our capital budget, and again, you see that the capital budget is much larger overall than what is being levied to the municipalities. So if you can go to the next slide. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of our forecast for the next few years. It looks reasonable, and I'll say reasonable because it's not 8%, 9%, 10%. It's within the range where, again, using reserves, using other strategies, looking at what the revenues actually are, we're in the ballpark of the 2 to 4 or 5% increase annually, and that's a good thing. It's not that we've tried to meet our numbers this year by pushing things off to future years. That's not a smart way of managing an enterprise, and we don't do that here. So I'm fairly confident that this is a good sustainable forecast, and obviously our internal forecast goes to 10-year cycles, but I'm just showing you a few years here. So you can go to the next slide, please. And then lastly, just to end, it's important to bear in mind that for CH, municipal funding still represents 26% of our overall funding. It's one of the lowest, if not the lowest percentage amongst CAs. So 26% comes from municipal funding, and you can see the other sources. The biggest majority is self-generated, and then a small contribution from the province. If you go to the next slide, again, I'll skip over these. What are some of the risks to this budget? We've done the best we can to look at everything, but inflation, who knows where it goes in 2023, what pressures it'll put. We're assuming we're out of COVID related restrictions for this coming year or disruption, but there is a risk that maybe we're not. And then we've assumed that we'll continue to see levels of construction and then the demand for permits and planning that we've seen over the last 3 years. But there's a bit of uncertainty there as well with what happens in that field. And then we're assuming that the province at least maintains its contribution on the dams and channels side of things. They will match 50 cents to the dollar if your project is picked and successful, because they have a limited pot of money at $5 million, I think, or somewhere around there for the entire province. So you have to apply to it. But we hope that continues, and then a few other things you can see there that are out of our control. You can go to the next slide, Adriana. Again, thank you very much for your time. I apologize if I've gone over my time limit by a little bit, but there was a lot to cover there, so appreciate you.
Hey, thank you, Vincent. Councilor Spillis.
It's a very intensive presentation. You covered all the bases, and I really don't have any questions. So just keep the good work.
Thank you. Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, again, thank you for coming and presenting today. Lots of great work being done. Appreciate being here today.
Councilor Hurst.
Sure, I do have a couple of questions. Maybe more comments, but I think I did look at your organizational strategy, and I would say well done on that one. I think visually really well prepared. So to your team internally, well done, SN. That was one observation. One other question I guess I would have is your comments around capital budgets this year versus next year. And I think I like the tone that you took with, this isn't just kicking the can up the road into next year. I think so kudos to that. And I think that's not always an easy conversation to have internally when you're going through that process, but I commend you and your team for taking that approach, because I think that's the right approach. I think the one ask, and maybe if you can't answer this today, that's fine. Does the Conservation Association do any field tours throughout the year to show individuals what projects you have or infrastructure upgrades over the course of time. I'm thinking more like a field trip type of thing. And if that is the case, I'd certainly be quite interested in seeing some of the infrastructure works that your team is working on. And we can see budgets here, but I think it's always nice. And again, on a day like today, not always ideal to do that, but when the weather's maybe a bit more accommodating. If that is the case, I'd be quite interested in seeing some of the work that your team's doing in person. So thank you.
May I just provide a comment through you, Your Worship? I think your last suggestion is an excellent one, Councillor. The association does biannual tours and things like that. We do one for our board, but now that you've mentioned it, I think at least every 4 years following a municipal council, perhaps we should look at extending an open invitation we'll try and pick a nice day, but usually I lose on that front. I have a bad record of picking nice days. From my wedding on down to anything to do with Conservation Authority business, but I'm actually going to implement that suggestion. I think that we're going to work on something, a bit of a half-day tour where everybody meets, and then we provide transportation from that point on and showcase some of the strategic areas, not just the good news stuff, but also areas where we're maybe facing challenges and can collaborate more on. So let me take that one back, and you're going to see something come from us.
Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. It's always, I'm always so impressed by your presentation when you come every year. So thank you. For me, the one slide in your presentation that stood out the most was the one that gives sort of the statistics on the recreation, how people have embraced the recreational opportunities in 2022. The 3 million plus hours experience in the parks, more than ever people learning to ski, the accessible trail. I went on your website, I see you do learn to mountain biking programs. So that really demonstrates just how valuable and wanted those recreational opportunities really are. So yeah, it's just really encouraging to see how successful Conservation in Halton has continued to provide for that. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I see all our conservations that we deal with here in Puslinch as valued partners, specifically on the planning side of things. You're the steward of the environment and the watersheds, and I understand there's a lot of challenges going forward and a lot of regulations coming out. And I can say to you that we didn't want to see the relationship change at all. We're quite happy with the service provided by Halton. I've said it in the past. I went through the process 10 years ago, and it was very smooth and quite easy. I see through the report that Conservation Halton is quite fiscally responsible. Seeing what you're getting done, coming in under inflation for staff raises, for your entire budget was definitely very challenging. It was for the county, it was for Puslinch. We're all in the same boat, so very appreciative of that. And yeah, I would be encouraged to do that tour, as long as the tour doesn't start at the bottom of Kelsall. We have to walk to the top. Give me a ride out, we're okay. But on a serious note, I did mention this at the last time you presented. There is some desire here in Puslinch, and I understand we are a very small contributor to your budget. So very appreciative of the fact that you treat us, and it appears that you treat us as an equal and an important partner. But we'd like to see possibly some improvements to the Halton conservation lands in Puslinch. We don't have any parking. We're not talking about 50 cars or anything like that, but trying to get them off the shoulder. People go for a walk in those areas. And I had asked you about it a year or two ago, then COVID hit and everything went crazy. And then, the province is doing what they're doing to the Conservation Authority. So just like to put that bug in your ear again. And if we could work together on something like that, I'd be really appreciated. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
The resolution is my finals.
The council received a delegation by Hassan Bassat, President and CEO of Conservation Halton, regarding the 2023 budget for information.
You're going to move for that. Councillor Hurst, seconded by Councillor Smoulis. All in favor? Carried. Have a great day. Thanks again for coming. So should we do the written delegation, then go into closed? Just get through delegations. So you have a resolution for that written delegation?
Certainly, the council received the delegation by Helmuth Villarenko and Kate DeWasha and Bruce Taylor of Concerned Citizens of Clifton regarding safety and maximum speed limits in and around Arville. And the council refers this matter to the Township Transportation Master Plan and that the correspondence be forwarded to the County Roads Committee.
Okay, you'll move that, please. Councilor Slow, seconded by Councilor Hurst. Mr. CEO, did you have anything you want to add to that about the timing around our master action plans?
Yeah, we're currently finalizing the revisions based on council's comments when it was presented, the first draft was presented to you. We hope to have that to you within the next month or so. And then if you're happy with the second draft, then we would go for public comment. So depending on the level of input that we get or what council feels is important to change based on the comments received or revisions they might want to make, we're looking at probably having the plan formalized or endorsed by council probably early second quarter. I would think that's the current time frame right now.
And what would be the process for this individual? Would they need to resubmit or?
Yeah, I think given that the plan hasn't been finalized yet, we don't know officially what the process is going to be to have these assessments done for certain requests. I think it would be best to just hold off until we have the process clearly identified. And then once it's identified, let them know, similar to what we did, for example, for the road renaming policy, right? Like once the procedure was established, then they should submit something in accordance with that. So I think that would be the advice for that.
I mean, would it be prudent to, I know it'll be double notification, but let them know that we've received it and that we'll be contacting them later? Because the only other way, I guess they'd have to view the video on YouTube to find out what our decision was. Is there always a follow-up feedback to these written delegations, I guess?
Yeah, we can send something like that.
Say that we, I'm sure. The final council. Any questions for the CEO on that? All in favor? Raise your hand.
Yeah, I did have a question, but not for the CAO.
Oh, sorry.
What was mentioned in the written delegation was the suggestion that some of the trails there are could or have potential to have some parking. And so I didn't know if we were able to be reaching out to the GRCA who owns the different trail properties and see if there was any potential or any, anything in the works for adding parking spaces. And then that would get actually the cars off the side of the roads. If there's appetite to be reaching out to Chris White or sending a letter to GRCA or.
It's wouldn't hurt to ask, right?
We can easily send them a letter and then put that request to them for sure.
And that's for, I don't know the name of,
Smith Loop
it's
and,
down on the hill by the river. Right?
and the one in.
I believe the other one, sorry, Mr. Reese. I'm not sure who owns the other one. I actually think it may be the city of Guelph that owns the other one, where it's actually a very confusing area because it says no trespassing, but yet there's cars around there all the time and people walking in it. Which I don't actually, I'm not really clear as to who owns it. Or if people are even supposed to be there. I believe that's the city of Guelph, so I'm not sure if maybe I can clarify.
Yes, we can reach out to the city of Guelph. So the Gorba has, from my understanding, permission to create bike trails within the city of Guelph lands, and you have Starkey Hill across the street to the south of Parkville Road, and then down Watson, the trails from the city of Guelph property come out in addition to the county property that's along the river. So there's kind of three components: Starkey Hill, down by the river, and then the city of Guelph lands that are part of the, I think it's part of the wellhead protection area, or the water taking area for their Arkle Springs. And Gorba, the Guelph Road Biking Association, I believe have permission to be in there making trails. So there's a lot of moving pieces there, but I don't know, Mr. CEO, could we query all of the landowners and see if there's any capital improvements?
Can I ask?
So satisfy your
Yeah, I think the concern is the cars on the road. For park along the side of the road. And so if there's opportunity to get those cars off the road, that would be a good piece of the puzzle to help with the safety concerns. I did have another follow-up. While we're waiting for the roads master action plan, is there any appetite to maybe request just a Black Cat for that stretch of road to help collect some data so that when it comes time, we have a little bit of information in, you know, in addition to the request here.
So I'm gonna back up a little bit. Both those roads are county roads. Shouldn't this be in the wheelhouse of the county? To be looking into these capital costs or capital improvements? So I would suggest then asking the county to look into it. And that's their responsibility.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, let them decide this.
And then Black Cat, I'm supportive of, I shouldn't speak it first, but it's great. Yeah, I mean, that data is, it's always good to have more data, so I don't know if councilors want to voice their opinion on the Black Cats.
Yeah, I would be happy with that.
So that'd be a request to the OPP. What's the basis though? Is it speeding complaint or is it, yeah?
Yeah, based on the delegation, there's concern over the speed around there, and we'll just see if people are driving. You know, the suggestion is that maybe people are driving too fast in the 50 zone.
So I would suggest, because the county not just last year, completed their road master action plan, and they have a process to deal with speeding complaints.
Oh, yes.
But I don't recall if the Black Cats were within that, or if that was still something loosely we could ask for as well. So maybe staff can look into that as more appropriate places to ask the county to put the speeding complaint through the road master action plan, or if we can.
Question of where would you want the Black Cat to be on a county road?
Yes.
If that's the case, then should we be requesting the county to consider that when this matter comes up to the roads committee of the county?
Yeah, so I didn't know here if our role was, we've now received a, you know, a request or a delegation from a resident. They've asked us to do some sort of action. I'd now like to ask the county to see where they would like to put the Black Cat and to help us gather some data.
Mr. Mayor, just following up with your earlier suggestion, refer back to the county and suggest that they consider implementing the Black Cat to gather more data on their roads.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anybody else? Need a resolution here?
Is it captured from the chair?
Just give
The council received the delegation by Helmut Bill Zarenko, Kate Dewasha, and Bruce Taylor of concerned citizens of Cleveland regarding safety and maximum speed limits in and around Arkle, and then staff advised the delegates of the process in order for comments to be included in the township transportation master plan. And that the correspondence be forwarded to the county roads committee to investigate parking infrastructure improvements to limit roadside parking and associated safety concerns. And the council directs staff to send a request to Wellington County Council to request that a Black Cat speed enforcement device be implemented to capture speed data. And the council directs staff to contact the city of Guelph and the GRCA to inquire about ownership and access restrictions in the area.
So, you want me to go first or you go first?
Just want to make a slight revision. The plan that we have is a roads management plan, just to get the title. It's not a transportation master plan, it's a roads management plan.
I'm certain if this makes it to the roast committee, they're gonna, or even Don Kuhl's desk is gonna ask what investigate means. Are we not just asking if there's future capital improvements for parking? On investigate if they need it, kind of two different things. So we're asking if there's something in the streamline that they're gonna improve parking in the area, or are we asking them to look into improving parking? Or both? Does that make sense?
Makes sense what you're saying. I guess I was keeping it, I like the way it was general, and not always like to come back with what you're doing. If we start, I guess if we start saying, look at this, we might miss something, I'll let them come back, and say, yeah, okay, this is what we're doing.
All right, I just know they're gonna call me, but I guess I just need to know what council wants me to say to them. They say, what do you mean by investigate? So all components of parking, whether there's any new or
Well, if I can, if the concern is just parking along the road, the county can recognize that where they're parking is in front of GRCA lands or who, like conservation lands or other lands. If they know who their road partner is, then they can reach out and start that conversation. So we're not saying who to reach out to, like Councillor Sepoulos is saying. We're asking them to help us deal with this parking issue. And if that means they have to reach out, then
I don't know to play the devil's. I don't know if there is a parking issue. What's the problem with people parking on the side of the road? It's just, you just don't like people parking on the side of the road. Is there a safety hazard? Is there sightline issues? Is there, I'm pretty certain part of it is a paved apron that's wide enough, so there isn't damage to the shoulder of the road. So what's the safety concern?
Mr. Mayor, the two areas that you previously cited, the one that has the City of Guelph, that's not a designated parking area, it's the side of the road, and the cars go through there at 80K.
So yeah, the top of the hill.
Yeah, so that is a safety concern specifically.
But the other two, I'm not sold on.
The other two, I agree with you, it's just so.
They can, I don't know, how do we gotta get through, we gotta go, so. I say, let's leave it with, let's see what we get back from the three other partners. And then we can dive into this deeper another time, and maybe then it'll be our roads management plan will be complete by that point, or that point.
Mr. Red, don't forget that this is going to the roads committee too, the same exact response. So they're going to be reacting as well on things that are important to them. So I think between us and them, there'll be enough overlap to cover everything there.
Okay. I'm comfortable then. Councilor Bailey,
Yep.
so we're not changing anything? Comfortable with the resolution as it was read? You have a mover or seconder?
We do have both.
Okay, all in favor? It's carried. I believe now we're going to close, correct?
Yes. The council should go into closed session under section 239 of the municipal act for the purpose of adoption and receipt of the previous closed minutes from December 21st, 2022. And confidential report regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, regarding the 2023 to 2026 township committee appointment.
Okay, you can move to that, please. Councilor Hurst. And second by Councilor Bailey. All in favor? That's carried. All right, Ms. White Fox, you have some resolutions for us, please?
The council moves into open session at 11:44.
Make it mover, please. Mr. Goyda, second by Councilor Sepoulos, all in favor? It's carried.
The council revises the youth advisory committee terms of reference to permit a maximum of 11 members instead of a maximum of 8.
Get a mover for that, please. Councilor Goyda, Councilor Hurst. Any questions or comments? All in favor? It's carried. Then we need do we have anybody with declaration of pecuniary interest for the
I do.
youth appointments? Councilor Bailey.
I do have a conflict of interest with regards to an applicant for the Youth Advisory Committee, as one of them is a family member.
Okay, thank you. The other declarations on this question resolution?
The council received the adoption and receipt of the previous closed minutes for December 21st, 2022 closed session, and the confidential report regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. And this is regarding the 2023 to 2026 township committee appointments. And whereas council of the corporation of the township of Portland deems it advisable to establish such committees and provide for the appointment of members thereto, the council gave 3 readings to bylaws 2023-005, being a bylaw to appoint the following members to the Committee of Adjustment, Planning and Development Advisory Committee, and Property Standards Committee: Paul Sadra, Jeffrey Warren, Dennis O'Connor, James Christopher Picard, and Councillor Spulett. Bylaw 2023-006, being a bylaw to appoint following members to the Recreation Advisory Committee: Vincent Lincott, Mary Chisitis, Joanna Jefferson, Stephanie McCrone, and Councillor Boyda. Bylaw 2023-007, being a bylaw to appoint following members to the Heritage Advisory Committee: John Levac, Andy Day, Chris Saunders, Lily Clammer Suchi, Christine O'Brien, and Councillor Hurst. And bylaw 2023-008, being a bylaw to appoint following members to the Youth Advisory Committee: Aaron Dockstader, Isla Penillo, Carter Driscoll, Chelsea McPherson, Katie Whaling, Kenzo Satori, Laz Fulford, Oliver Van Gerwen, Talila Weinberg, Xander Weinberg, and Councillor Bailey.
Okay, I mean, mover for that. Do we have a mover already? Councillor Hurst, seconder. Councillor Goida, all in favor? It's carried. All right.
And finally, that council appoints the following member to the Youth Advisory Committee: Carter DeVries, and Mr. Chair, Councillor Bailey has declared a conflict with it.
Right, can I get a move for that? Councillor Goida, seconded by Councillor Spillis. All in favor? It's carried. All right, I believe that's the end of our resolutions from the coast. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break to allow staff to join us virtually, and we will resume. All right, welcome back, everyone, and we'll dive right into item number 9.2.1. That's the finance report. Mrs. Sand.
Good morning, Council. Sorry, I'm just opening up the agenda. So this is just the capital and operating budget update report based on the direction that was provided at previous council meetings. And also based on new information that was available to staff after what was presented at the previous council meetings. So the report has been given to all of you, and if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sand. Councillor Spillis.
I don't have any specific questions or report. I have 3 motions with respect to the report to make.
Maybe just go around the table first and
Sure.
back to those.
What you call it.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Can you just confirm for me on page 5 of the report, the OCIF funding? You've indicated it's been an increase of 50,000 from the 2022 allocation. Is that just for 2023 or will that be moving forward?
So it is for 2023. Unfortunately, we do receive our funding allocations for this grant funding on an annual basis. And it's usually in December of every year. And just based on previous correspondence that we've received from the ministry, that the funding isn't basically the amount is confirmed on an annual basis and should not be assumed. I know that there have been some local municipalities that have seen a decrease in the funding from 2022 to 2023. Luckily, the maximum of the 15% from 2022 to 2023. But I'm not 100% sure that the 2024 funding will be the same as 2023 funding.
Okay. And then I think it's on page 5, just in terms of this, the outdoor parks maintenance. And maybe this is a question for Mr. Fowler, but how many of the new signs have been installed throughout the township with the new branding?
Good afternoon, Council. I can let you know that all this identified signage that was approved by Council has been installed, and there's no current signs left to be installed.
Sorry, how many were installed?
Park-
Grounds, not on buildings.
We have signage in all our parks and green spaces, so around 10 or 11.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Councillor Hurst.
No questions. I appreciate the report. It's quite thorough.
Councillor Goyette.
I don't have any questions either.
I just would like council to have a quick discussion on where to go, my note. It's page 4 of the report. Be sure they're on. Yes, page 4 of the report is the replacement of the electronic sign. I just want council to give some clarification that it's our prerogative to have the sign replaced with the hope that we find some third-party funding partners. So basically what I'm saying is this report is stating that it would be all third-party funding through federal grants and third-party, that it is our desire to have the sign replaced if that were not to be come to fruition. So maybe some comments on that, Councilor Spillis.
Yeah, I think the wording here is what covers that, but at the same time it doesn't. So I agree that when we discussed this last time, we said it's our desire to have all third-party funding. But it was always understood in my mind that whatever is not covered by third-party funding will be covered through whatever levy we're going to have, or whatever grants we might get from the county.
Councilor Kelly.
Yeah, can I just ask, Mary, is this electronic sign now will it be in the asset management plan?
Yes. It should be in the asset management plan. Because it is a current asset.
Yeah.
So now that it's in the capital budget and forecast, as we implement the asset management system, it will also be incorporated in there.
Okay.
So a potential funding source, I believe the reason, Councillor Bailey, you are asking this, is that it could be funded by the asset management discretionary reserve because it's a current asset.
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you.
No problem.
Councilor Hurst.
No question.
Yeah, no questions.
Okay. Because there was discussion about a new sign, we were going to put conduit in when we do the pre-paving of, it's not necessarily the replacement of that specific red sign, it's the new with the new branding, the new, so that's understood, okay? Okay, so I guess unless there's any other comments or questions, then we'll go to Councilor Spillis for his resolutions.
Yes, I have 3 motions. I suggest to discuss them separately. Motion number 1 is whereas the OCC final grant has been increased by 50,000, which has the effect of reducing contribution from the asset management discretionary reserve by a similar amount. Be resolved that 50,000 from the asset management discretionary reserve be redirected to the gravel roads improvement reserve annually. So I understand what staff was saying, but it's not a sure bet that we're going to have this amount, $50,000 extra every year. But I think we can look at that next year, and the fact that we want to increase the gravel roads to solve the problem we have in the future, we want to do it sooner. I think we got to put more funds into the program. And right now, it's money that we got free. It's not, I should say, free. It's money that was given to us. And to make use of it, I think it'd be prudent rather than putting it into a general reserve.
Thank you. Can I move seconder for that, please? Sorry, I heard her first. Councilor Good. All right, Councilor Bailey, comments?
No comments right now.
Councilor Hurst. No, thanks. Councilor Gordon.
Yes, I would support that 100%.
Maybe we'll just ask, I appreciate the support from council for this program. Mr. Fowler, do you have an indication of a ballpark figure on the upgrade of a gravel road to a surface road, the cost of that? I believe there's a number that's been floating around up there.
The safe assumption provided by our engineering firm was around including sub-base work around 250,000 per kilometer.
What's the average length of between concessions?
The average length within the township's about 2 kilometers to 2.5 kilometers per concession.
So rough math, we're close to $1 million, depending on the challenges with the road. So, Mrs. Sand, with this additional 50K proposed by Councillor Sepoulis, what would be the contribution annually to that gravel roads improvement reserve?
Yep, just one moment, please.
So where I'm going with that is I'm trying to find an end point of additional funds to that reserve. And in my mind, if we get to around 400K annually or close to, that gives us 800 every second year. And that puts us in a position to be 80% funding the gravel road improvement. And then the remainder 20% could be hopefully DCs, grants from the feds, grants from the province, wherever it may come from, because with Mr. Sand's work in the past, we haven't had to use the reserve to pay for the whole shooting match. So to me, if we get to, and we're very close to that number, we're soon going to be able to say this is built and leave it in the hands of staff to just look at the road stuff upgrade. So anyways, I'm just trying to give the council some sunset on listening to me hard about improving this reserve. So, and I think we're close. So Mrs. Sand, do you have that number?
So in the previous versions of the budget, it was 220,800. With the additional 50,000, it's 270,800.
Okay, so we're getting very close, and it's good work by all here. So I'm very supportive of that. Resolution staff, do you have any concerns with the resolution proposed by?
Yeah. No concerns. No concerns. But I believe Ms. Hoyt-Fox, at the very end, we can put the resolution up. I've just made some minor revisions just in terms of financial terminology and whatnot. So is that okay?
Yes, just for Councillor Sepoulis, we're comfortable with it, though. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? It's carried. All right, Councillor Sepoulis?
Okay, second motion is another matter that our mayor has been talking to us over the past couple of years. It's to do with the aggregate levy. It's right now in the operating budget, and funds get transferred from the operating into the capital, and we're still using that money to pay for operating matters. I think it's prudent to take all that money out of the operating and put it into capital. It's going to be bottom line zero, because whatever you take, whatever revenue you take out of the operating and you put the same revenue into the capital, bottom line's the same. Your operating budget numbers will show a high number and your capital numbers will decrease by the same amount. Optically, it's zero on the bottom line in terms of what we're trying to achieve. The overall number will still be the same, but it's going to be an increase in the operating and decrease in the capital. So my motion is to do that. And what I'm saying is, whereas it desires to mitigate the risk associated with keeping the aggregate levy in the operating budget in the event of the aggregate production decreases significantly, be resolved, the staff be requested to transfer the aggregate levy to the capital budget to be used to reduce equally the capital tax levy being used to contribute to asset management discretionary reserve.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that, please? Councillor, go ahead. I may just go to Mr. CAO. No, I've had discussions with you, but you explain it well. There's risks associated with having it in operating if some production numbers decline, and maybe just for the public's benefit, you just explain on a high high level why it's better to have it in capital versus in the operating. Does that make sense?
Sure, because the capital allocation is used for projects in the future and in, you know, as we were just talking about the dedication to the roads improvement reserve is for projects in the future. So if there ever is a situation in a year where production does go down, there's, you know, an economic downturn or something like that. All that would happen is the contribution to the capital reserve for future projects would be reduced for that year. And then we'd have some time still to try and catch up and find ways to resolve that. Whereas if it remains in the operating budget and the number goes down, you can be faced with an operating budget deficit in that year. And that's never a position municipality wants to be in a deficit with their operations. So it's basically just balancing it out and putting a bit of protection for the municipality there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. No, I understand where this is coming from. I appreciate Mr. CEO's explanation there. We don't want to be, you know, getting into any sort of operational deficit at some point. So this helps keeps the risk down. And so I'm supportive of that.
Councilor Hurst.
I'm supportive. I appreciate the explanation. I think it makes strategic sense for the municipality. I'm supportive.
Councilor Boyd.
Yeah, I agree. I think the township doesn't have control over the aggregate production, and so I think you know, this is a good motion by Councilor Lewis to mitigate that risk should that production go down. So I would support that.
I guess I would always ask, in a public meeting, there will likely be a slide deck or component where some numbers will look quite high, and I just assume we're going to have some sort of asterisk or message there in the public meeting to explain that again, even though we've just done it here, to ensure the residents that they're not going to 15% or something astronomical increase. It's just a more of an accounting process. Sure. That would be appropriate. All right.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was just minor revisions to this when staff took a look at it. Would you want this up on the screen just to take a look
Sure,
at?
please.
Great.
Sorry, Miss White Fox, I don't see it on the Zoom screen either, yet.
Do we need to read it or? Yeah, read it.
Whereas it is desirable to mitigate the risk associated with keeping the aggregate levy in the operating budget in the event the aggregate production decreases significantly. Be it resolved that staff be requested to transfer the full aggregate levy from the operating budget to the capital budget with the incremental amount from the operating budget to be used to reduce equally the capital tax levy funding being used to contribute to the asset management discretionary reserve and increasing the operating tax levy funding required with the net zero budgeted tax levy impact.
Well, that wording across from us.
Oh, yeah, so zero, so bottom line.
Who do I get to second that? I forget. Was it Councilor Goyda seconded that originally?
Yeah,
So you're comfortable with that? All right. Any questions for staff? Okay, all in favor? Carry them.
Okay, one more motion. I think I need a sort of a preamble from our CEO on what transpired yesterday and what the issues were associated with the transpired. So one of our CEO can talk about the reacting to the ice storm and having impact on the gravel road and the maintenance.
Sure. We definitely encountered some challenges with regards to the weather yesterday. The staff we had available was out. Some were starting at midnight working on the ice, and others came in starting at 3 and then progressively added forces to wherever possible. Challenges we were still short-staffed. We're having some considerable challenges, like many of our municipal partners have been contacting them with regards to the approach of using seasonal operators. That just, it's very, very difficult to secure seasonal operators, and increasingly so in the last number of years. So we were short-staffed. We got out as quickly as we possibly could. But we were still in a situation where we didn't have enough people to operate the equipment necessary given the weather conditions of the time. So we did the best that we could with what we had, and the response was a little bit delayed from what some had hoped for. But we did what we could with what we had.
Okay, so my next motion deals with addressing this matter that we can't get seasonal people to help out with the maintenance that we need. So what I'm doing is asking that we put some money back in the operating budget to pay for a full-time equipment operator so that staff can react in a timely fashion to jump on the ice storms. This climate change is really mucking us up. Like we've got a possibility of freezing rain again tonight and tomorrow night. And then guess what happens in the springtime? You know, you got a freeze-thaw cycle. So it really causes a lot of hardship for people on gravel roads. Okay, so here's a motion. Whereas staff are finding it difficult to hire seasonal workers, and whereas the community expectations cannot be met with staff shortages for gravel road maintenance and landscaped areas, be resolved that the operating budget be increased to hire a full-time equipment operator with funds being obtained from the 0.5% operating levy increase, reallocation of 20,000 identified for temporary workers, and 32,000 from the 2022 surplus. So I'm not married to the breakdown of the money, but I think we do have to bite the bullet and give the tools that our staff need to address the difficult times they're facing, the climate change, and not be able to hire seasonal workers.
Yeah, I don't think that was moved. Can I get a seconder so we can discuss that, please? Councilor Goyda? All right, Councilor Bailey.
Think about that.
You know what, I'm gonna pause. I'm just gonna ask Ms. White Fox to put her screen up on that screen so we can all see it because of the numbers. And what's the resolution? It has been tweaked slightly, apparently, just a number of details.
I just want to have a concern either way.
And Mrs. Sand, first. So Mrs. Sand, I hope, I'm not sure if you've been able to digest this in advance, but I guess my question to you would be for council, the total impact on the budget would be a 0.5 operating levy increase.
Yes, sorry, Ms. White Fox, I can't see the screen with the proposed resolution.
Hey, Scott. Good. I mean, we're not done. We didn't even start till.
Mayor, the amount for a 0.5% tax levy increase is the 24,000 that's noted there. I believe what I heard from Councillor Sapoulis is that the hiring of a full-time equipment operator would also result in the reduction of one of the seasonal equipment operators. So currently the township has 2 seasonal equipment operators. But I believe that we want to find savings by reducing it from 2 to 1 seasonal equipment operator. So the numbers here are based on the 25,521 is based on reduction of seasonal equipment operators from 2 to 1. The 24,000 is based on a 0.5% levy increase, which would result in a 0.5% increase to the residential tax rate for the median property. And then the 27,110 is just the difference between how much it would cost to hire a new full-time equipment operator, reducing those other amounts that are noted in the proposed resolution.
So Mrs. Sand, ultimately, this would result in a total tax increase to Coastal residents that would be presented at our public meeting of 4.42%. So what I did is 3.92 times 0.5%.
Sorry. Are you looking at the blended impact so I'm just looking at the township impact. So that would be 3.89% plus 0.5 is 4.39% for the township.
3.9 be what's hitting the press. Okay. So everybody's, I'll just go to staff real quick. Any concerns with the proposal from Councillor Secoulas?
I think it would be a huge help. Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Bailey.
No, I think that was the answer to the question I was going to ask, as long as this would help resolve that. So do we find that we're not getting any applicants coming forward because they're wanting full-time position and not part-time? Is that?
That's a big concern of it, yes, and that's consistent with what other municipalities are telling me as well.
Okay. Is there opportunity to be sharing a position with another municipality, so it's part-time here and part-time there?
Tried that, but most of them are short-staffed as well. And the reality is that we both need them to be plowing at the same time. So that has some real challenges there, right?
Right.
It doesn't just snow here.
No, I think this is a very, I think this is a clever way to, handle a few situations here. So great job.
Okay, Councillor Hurst.
Sure, a couple of questions, and maybe backtracking to the initial challenges of this week. I'm assuming that the township has a service standard in terms of road maintenance. And unfortunately, we had some staffing issues. Was the service standard that's been established within the township met, even though there are challenges, or was it not met? I guess is maybe just a point of clarity.
I don't believe yesterday we were able to meet with Mr. Fowler. Could you speak to that specifically? I don't want to give misinformation there. Were we meeting our own service standard levels, or was that the touch and go yesterday?
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So about five to 6 years ago, council adopted the policy of the minimum maintenance standards of Ontario for within the township of Puslinch. This is a manual that has certain guidelines, policies, and response times that are consistent throughout Ontario if adopted. Yesterday's storm, I can say that even though there were several complaints and concerns due to service levels, we were well within the minimum maintenance standard service levels. With that being said, to explain that to concerned residents is not really a solution or an answer that they're looking for, and it's usually disregarded immediately.
Fair, good point of clarity, but I think just like in a sense of not having the pendulum swing too hard in any one way, I think it's important to reference the fact that there are service standards and they are being met. Unfortunately, people are impacted and depending on the circumstance and just like the sample size of one, I live in concession 4 and it was in good shape. So granted, that's sample size of 1. So I think Councillor Bailey noted a couple of questions, and I guess maybe just further clarity. The ability to attract and retain staff. The feeling of staff would be that transitioning an individual or a role from a part-time role to a full-time role would alleviate the issue of not attracting any staff to run the equipment. Is that correct in my understanding? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The experience we've been finding in the last few years is typically the seasonal operators we would get would be people who work for some of the larger contracting firms through the summer. And they've been calling their people back earlier and earlier, sometimes because of whether they could start up some of their construction projects, so they would call them back. So then we would lose people going back to their year-round employment or their summertime employment. Sorry, and yeah, the consistent comment that we've been regularly hearing when we go through the application or recruitment process is that they'd be very interested if it was full-time, but they don't want to commit to something that they may or may not be able to honor that commitment if they get called back early to their other seasonal employment.
So, thank you for the clarity, and maybe just my last question would be so obviously this came out of a winter weather incident. Can you maybe just provide, again, for staff to provide a bit of direction as to what equipment operator would be doing beyond the winter snow removal process? I understand that we're transitioning another part-time individual in another part of the calendar year, but how does this all sync up? I'm assuming the workload is just transitioned from 2 part-time to 1 full-time. Is that maybe a simplistic way of looking at it?
I'll let Mr. Fowler speak to some of the specifics, but basically we have 2 seasonal operators now. We're going to still stick with 1, and one of the seasonal would become a full-time. So we'll still be able to bring in one additional person to help through the peak times during the winter. But in terms of other duties throughout the year, maybe Mr. Fowler, if you could speak to what this individual will be doing in terms of maintenance and coverage for vacations and those types of things, just so we have some buffer in the staff complement.
Yes, thank you. So identified earlier in late fall, there was a conversation with council about the new online recreational projects and activities that will be coming online in 2023, 2024. There's full expectation that not only would the township benefit from a full-time employee that we can count on, we can also transition that employee into /public works /parks that can also assist with the upgraded service levels that will be required within our recreation and parks department.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity. It helps me understand that. Thank you. Let's go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilor Hurst. I had that same question about whether that person could transition to cost. So that's good. I think that council has done a good job in investing in the proper equipment that we need for our roads and parks. But if we don't have the operators to be operating that equipment, then it's not serving its intended purpose for the community. So if it's just sitting in the yard, not on the road, then that's a problem. And I think that this would allow us to respond quicker and faster to the expectations of the community and provide for just safer roads in general. So I wholeheartedly support that motion.
Okay. Thank you, Council. I'm supportive of the motion. So one thing I will highlight is that part of the funding for this individual is through the surplus, which would mean there would be that equivalent amount, which is about 0.25% of a tax hike being carried over to next year. And so that will have to be absorbed into the operating budget next year off the hop. But I just did some quick math. We're already near the end of January. I mean, it'd be ideal to have this person in place in 2 weeks. I don't know the timing that you're going to be able to do this, but if there is gapping or whatever they call that, when we're going to budget for a full year, we're already down a month. Reality might be the person might not be in place for February, so my math was $6,385 per month. Essentially, the round number for the cost of this individual. We don't bill it for 2 months. I'd like that money needs to come out of the surplus component of this fund. Sure. So we're not carrying as much over next year. So beyond that, I know that's. Does that make sense to council? So well, beyond that, I'm very proud that council is identifying this concern. Because people are the hardest component of the budget to approve, and we do have higher expectations from our community. We are meeting our minimum and exceeding our minimum maintenance standards, but the nature of the beast is people are moving here and have been here a long time and are now ready for a little bit higher service. And if we're able to provide that to them, that's great. And continue to build the gravel roads improvement reserve and hopefully be able to pave roads going in the future and it's all good. Anything you want to add, Mr. Fowler?
No, once again, I'd like to thank council for the consideration and just as an example, to clarify for council, the addition of an additional equipment operator basically would free up a heavy equipment operator to have both graders out on the gravel roads, one to the east, one to the west. And that will pretty much guarantee a faster response time for ice blading gravel roads while still keeping salt units on our asphalt system. Thank you.
Favor? Scary, that's your final answer to the motion. You have another resolution? All right, we'll move on to which one?
Can I just-
It's already passed.
No, not based on that, but I understand that some of the concerns yesterday, I don't know whether they could have been alleviated, but I noticed that the County of Wellington had put out, you know, a media post saying, hey, it's really foggy, hey, be careful on the roads kind of idea. And I'm just wondering if maybe that's something the township could be putting in, saying, you know, caution on the conditions today. We've got our one grader out in the west side, you know, like just try to update using social media so that the public then know, you know, where the graders are, where the plows are. We can be upping some of that media, social media.
We can take a look at that. We don't have the resources, you know, coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning when the guys were out, right? So we will, I think if we can put out things like just advisories, but in terms of giving updates as to where the equipment is, that's kind of going to then require someone to be sitting there to be updating and radioing back and forth the equipment. I think more of just the cautions that hey, conditions aren't ideal in the area, only travel if you absolutely necessary, that kind of stuff.
That's, yeah.
In terms of the updates to where the equipment is, that might not be a good approach at this time.
We haven't named our equipment on either, so.
What's our role once there's vehicles off the road, slightly off the road? I mean, we're not hooking vehicles up to our grader, pulling them out of the ditch.
It's not
I mean,
another
so
role.
when we receive these calls, what's our role? Where, you know, is there the expectation that if you're working on this road and because they call on that road, do they drop what they're doing on this road and go over there, or?
That's really not the intent or best practice, no, because they're trying to get through all the routes as quickly as they can in a timely fashion. And if they're, you know, hop skipping and jumping all over because an individual's here, there, or wherever, then they're stopping that route. That's going to be impacting other people as well. So they'll get to all the routes as quickly as they possibly can. And then, no, it's not their role to be pulling vehicles out of ditches or things like that. It's to help improve the road conditions to a point where, you know, proper vehicle recovery equipment can get there and help them out, right?
So I assume then if somebody's in the ditch off the road, how do we liaise with the tow company once the road is sanded or ice bladed? Is that something they just call the 763-1226, press 6, and we get the on-call person and say, hey, I've called the tow truck. They're going to be here at whatever, or how does that connection work?
Maybe Mr. Fowler can speak. I don't know those operational details.
Thank you. Yes, past practice has been whenever Public Works has been notified of a disabled vehicle, whether it's stuck or in the ditch. Again, like Mr. Swindigger indicated, we do not drop the current roads we're working on. We prioritize. So once that road is done, then we head over to whatever road, whether the vehicle is blocking the road or a school bus, and we try to get the road up to standards, where whether it be a tow truck or if it's just a quick little pull, we have in the past pulled the car out just to kind of free up the roadway. But standard practices, it's the driver is responsible for identifying a tow company and assisting them. We just make sure the road is passable so the tow truck can get down it.
And if a tow truck is coming to assist a resident, how do they find out when the road is safe? I don't want to say safe. How do they find out when the road has been sanded or ice bladed so that they can proceed down it to assist the individual that's stuck?
We do not have communication with the tow companies. Usually the driver will determine as soon as they pull off the asphalt if the road has been sanded or if it's still glare ice condition. Whereas then it'll be the discretion of the tow truck to either proceed or wait for one of our service units to treat the road.
So if a tow truck operator calls the after hours number at 3 in the morning, is it gonna be answered? So 763-1226, press 6, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the current on-call number for Public Works. Somebody will respond, yes.
Then there would be a way of communicating at least for individuals and the tow company. So, okay, that's perfect. Thank you. Did I spur any further questions? Okay. All right, I believe which one did we do?
9222.
9222, next one. All right, interim property. Who's presenting this? Ms. Hassan.
Hello, council. This is just an annual report in order to bill for the interim tax levy and with the bylaw that's required in accordance with the municipal act. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Resolution.
The report FIN 2023-002 entitled 2023 interim property tax levy and due dates be received, and the council gave 3 readings to bylaw number 2023-002 being a bylaw to provide for the levy and collection of the 2023 interim tax levy.
You're gonna move for that, please. Councilor Bailey, seconded by Councilor Willis, all in favor? Carried. All right, next one. 931, Mr. Bunn. All right, Ms. Whitebox will present this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a statutory report that's required after a municipal election has taken place, and it's to report on accessibility during the election. So it just highlights that we did an audit prior to the election and anywhere that we can improve upon as we go forward into the next term. I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Okay, you gonna read the resolution, please?
The report ADM 2023-001 entitled 2022 Municipal and School Board Elections Accessibility Report be received for information.
Okay, move for that, please. Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Bailey, all in favor? Sorry, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff for taking the actions to prevent or removing any of the barriers to the residents to come out to vote. One of the actions was the vote by mail option, and I'm just wondering if there's any feedback on how that went.
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff are preparing to bring forward an information report for council that kind of summarizes all of this, summarizes the public engagement that went on prior to this election, given that this is the first time we used an alternate voting method. So we're hoping to bring that forward and shortly at one of the future meetings.
Great, thank you.
All in favor again? Carried. All right. Goals and objectives. Mr. CEO.
Sure. So thank you very much. These are the goals and objectives that individual members of council identified for the term of council. What we want to do is set the municipality up for success as much as we can to be proactive, to have a vision as to how things would look different at the end of term of council than at the beginning, and not just spending our time being reactive to the issues that come up along the way. So here's the specific issues that you as members of council have identified. What we're seeking direction from all of council is, which ones do you collectively agree on that you want to move forward with? And once we receive that list and the timing for them, what we anticipate doing then would be to incorporate that into the work plans that we prepare and to ensure it as best as we can so that these objectives will be completed by the end of this term of council. It's basically just helping us plan ahead to make sure that you achieve what you want through this term of council. We put the information in as best as we have it and based on our understanding of what we received. So if there's some additional information that some members of council might request on some of the topics that I'd asked the member who raised it to kind of identify what it was. We took our best guesses to, do we have enough information? Are we familiar enough with what they're speaking about to comment on it? And then based on that, can it be accommodated within the existing resources that we have, yes or no? And then the suggested time frame within the 4-year term of council. What we would request in terms of timing, maybe there's some specifics, Mrs. Sand could speak to that, but I know as this part of Bill 23, there's a number of studies and updates that we need to do in the first year resulting from the new legislation from the province. So if at all possible, we try to not, heavy load everything in the first year because we're already going to be doing quite a bit of stuff with all the requirements from the province in the first year or so. So those are the specific things, and we're just trying to come up with a plan for the term of council to achieve what your goals are. And we just want to make sure that all of you agree with what it is, and that there isn't something that you want us working on that only one of you thought the others don't agree with. So it's kind of up to you to decide what you would like us to focus on for the term.
So you want to go through all of these right now?
If at all possible, if you want to, are you supportive of them all? You want to take some of them out, and what's the timing of them? Those kinds of things, or do you want to take more time at a future meeting? That's up to you as well. It just we can't really develop the overall work plans until we know for sure which items you want us to achieve for the term.
So if what I'm seeing here is there's majority of them are supported by staff, the recommendations. So to me, those, I'm not going to go against the councilor sees this goal and objective, but the largest component is can this be accomplished with the current staffing? So if we support these items, can then you just report back on, or I don't know, how do you want to deal with the staffing component of it? Because some of this may have to go to consultants, and would you come back? So if we all agree that, yeah, we like these goals and objectives, would it take a long time for you to come back and say, well, this is the costing to all of these, and then narrow it down, or do we need to hash that all out?
Yeah, some of them we can't tell you what the price is going to be because we might not even have enough because some of these might have been the first time or we don't have enough details as to how extensive was the thought on what was being incorporated in this. So if you basically agree, like you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, of the ones that we say yes, we can achieve those are fairly straightforward, but there's ones that we can. And if you're generally supportive of it, if you want to simply say, well, give us some more information, maybe that member of council can identify, well, this is what I mean by that. And then that could be brought to a further meeting. We could then add it to the work plan. We could proceed with the ones you're comfortable with now. But I think what's outlined in the report as well is that even if we don't have enough of the details right now, if it's going to be in year 2, 3, or 4, what we could do is just put it in as a placeholder for that year. And then during that budget year, we'll say, okay, you identified that you had an interest in achieving this. We've had some more time. So during, for example, the third year of this council term, in that budget, we can come forward and say, okay, this goal was identified as this. To achieve that, you would need this determined at that time in that year's budget if you want to still proceed with it.
What are your thoughts? There's a few yellow ones here that I feel need a little more consensus from the group, and then leaving it with staff for now to just do as Mr. CEO just spoke of, because it seems like there's quite a few things there. None of the ones that are green do I have concerns with, and I don't necessarily have concerns with the yellow ones. So that would basically give them direction on what we want, and then I think we'd have more information on going forward. I'm comfortable leaving the staff to, through this and the work plan, prioritize those. Is that palatable to council?
You mean green in the 2 columns, or you mean green in the first column?
Green in the first column, because that's kind of the directive, the goal for councilor's ideas. And then we don't really know, like even the admin center is a no, but from direction from council, we know that's coming back to us. It's going to be cost, you know what I mean? So as long as green in the first column, I'm comfortable leaving with staff to say, well, yeah, we know that you have this as a goal objective, but we put it in year 4 because of X, and boom, 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 and that way we don't have to get too far into the weeds today.
I'm fine with that approach, Mr. Mayor. The one thing is, there's a lot of yellows here. Are we giving the councils the opportunity?
Yes, so we'll go through the yellow ones. Focus today right now on the yellow ones and then.
Sure, I'm fine with that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, so, I gotta say, stop saying, Councilor Bailey, increased recreational opportunities. Do you want to?
Yeah, can I go through my first number 6 there then?
Yes.
Because I was actually going to just propose removing A, B, C, and D.
Okay.
And then my question E, I've just got, I think, living where we live, a lot of pits in the area, and I think it would be really great to be part of the conversation and how to get them rehabilitated or reused or something, just getting that conversation, that partnership stuff going. My question, I guess, is to you, Mr. Mayor, is TAPMO doing any of that kind of discussion through their
Well, we're always, even at the municipal level, we're in the, we have discussions with the aggregate operators, but they very much still have to follow their site plans for rehabilitation, which falls under the purview of the MNRF. But you also have legacy pits, which I'm not sure we have any that falls under, or I believe, but I don't think that's as applicable. It's a good initiative. It's everything to do with the area industry is in provincial wheelhouse, so we can comment and ask. But definitely we can ask Kevin Mitchell and the CBM equivalent, report to council on their rehabilitation plans, similarly to, and we'll talk about it later with the University of Guelph. We're going to have a meeting with them and about their end use for the Mill Creek pit. So it's tough to do any influence on the rehab because it's in the provincial wheelhouse. So I don't know if that helps you or not.
Yeah, I guess I put that in there hoping that we can have some discussion just on how we can help influence, because we know those plans can change, they can be modified, and if there's sort of a consensus in the whole municipality, we've got a vision for what we would like to see. There's some really fantastic remediation projects that have happened, and I just look at them and see, wow, that would really benefit residents if we could turn that into something. And so I'm just not sure where that connection happens.
What I would suggest, if you have a pulse on these other projects, is that if on your own merit or not merit, but if you can put something together, and what we could do is ask MPP Arnott for a meeting that in his office with representatives from, I don't know if that'd be either way, we either pitch it to CBM or the operators in our community. And then once you see if we're getting traction and maybe parallel, run it through the speaker. And then let's just see it.
What I'd suggest is if you could provide us with some examples of what you're thinking you'd like to see achieved. If we could then craft a document, a policy or a desire or a goal of council to see this with aggregate operations, then we have a quantified ask that we can go to the various operators or to the minister or to our MPP or something like that. So if we can have a quantified ask, and I know that there have been some good examples of rehabilitations that have been beneficial to the community. I think one aspect that they're going to want to know is, well, who then would own the property? Because they're not really going to be interested in public recreation on private property. They're going to be looking to make estate lots or things like that. So I think if we can quantify what our ask would be, maybe we can then give us some examples on that. We can try and craft a document, get all of council supportive of that, and then we could use this as something we could point to when, say, we could ask all the existing operators, are there any opportunities for this in your post-closure plan, or if heaven forbid that there's a new aggregate operation coming to the community, as part of the commenting from the municipality on it, how could this be incorporated into the long-term plans for this site? So I think if we could do some work on creating what the ask is, that would be a good thing. Okay.
That work for you?
That works for me. And I guess me putting this in here too is also wanting to know does the rest of council think this is a good idea, and would they be supportive? There's no sense in doing all this work and then a few months down the road going, oh yeah, thanks for all that work, but we didn't really support it. You know, so I was hoping today might be a little more of, sure, we can get behind that.
We're gonna recess because we have to change staff. And we'll just carry on this conversation with these people more. We'll take a fast rate, Jeff. 5 minute, 10-minute break, 5-minute break. Ready, Freddie? Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so where we're at is Margie Bailey is discussing her recommendations here. Maybe you just want, Mr. CEO was mentioned that we can just build the criteria for what you're trying to achieve, Mr. Bailey?
Yeah.
Is that fairly clear, Mr. CEO? Yes. What about the Mayor Council for that?
Yeah, the good time to have influences when these people are coming for approvals to get them.
Yes.
And that's not to get. Right now, you're relying on their willingness to cooperate. So I see a little bit of pitfall there that we might not get all of them to agree.
The only component I maybe don't want to remove entirely is it says inventory of municipal properties that was specific to that Watson Road. Really like staff to look into the potential for a severance off funds part of that property. Find out if it is possible. I don't know if it's under GRC protections or not, because and then use that money towards the admin center. The municipality also doesn't pay DC charges, so our park land indication fees. So we were able to get us a lot there and then subsidize the admin center. That'd be a great relief to the taxpayer for this planned expansion. However, there are some challenges with public works using it for certain uses, but I believe it warrants at least a look at it. So we just like council and maybe say some words about that.
I agree. If we can reduce the amount of loan we have to take out to construct the building, better we are on.
Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I think we know of this property and we can talk about what potential is. So.
Yeah, I'm supportive of exploring the option. I think it's important to know the background before any decisions made to do one certain person. I'm supportive of the process.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, the next item is number 7.
And I don't think that's needed in our goals for this term of council. I know forgetting, and I'm going to get the term wrong, road management plan coming up. So hopefully some of that, speeding and things can be kind of dealt with through that. And maybe this is something state communities can look at doing some sort of campaign. So I propose to just remove that from the list. So number 10, and I intended on sending this out, but I don't know if everyone is aware, but there is a active transportation master plan that was put out in 2012, I believe, through the County of Wellington, and Councillor Wayne Stokely was part of that steering committee. And I just wanted to bring it forward more as a gauge to see how Whitlam is doing in regards to the recommendations in the plan, perhaps incorporate or begin to implement some of the recommended goals if we're not doing that. There is a summary of recommendations. There is potential, if there's something we want to move forward with, to be sharing cost with the county, which I thought was a really interesting thing that I read in there. It was a 50-50 share, which you don't see all that often. So that was kind of nice. So that's why I brought that forward. I would just love to see how Osage can kind of link into active transportation. And it's not just Wellington County, it's also how it's tapping into neighboring areas, Cambridge, Milton, Hamilton, and if someone wanted to cycle from, they're even saying Lake Ontario, how we can be connecting as greater communities. So that's why I brought that for there.
Okay, that's a big bite to take, I think. I'm not sure how staff, obviously we don't have the resources, but do you have any inclination on how or direction forward for something like that?
I haven't seen any indication when we're making some of our decisions where this plan has fit in. So it could be just as simple as let's look at the plan and see where it can be fitting in. I was kind of looking maybe for a little bit of staff to be able to say, oh, right, here's the plan. My one question was, did we even, I think the township, what did it say? Sorry, I have my notes here somewhere, but did we even agree to this plan? Is it part of what we're basing some of our decisions on? Or was it just a plan that was put out there? So I'm just trying to figure out where West Lynch is fitting into this plan. And maybe that's just the starting point.
To my knowledge, no, we didn't participate in the creation of that plan that was done at the county level. That's my understanding of it. But perhaps what we could do in terms of next step to see what we potentially could do with this or how it could benefit the municipality. Maybe if you can forward some of that information to me, we can take a look at it and then bring something forward to council in terms of report. Here's what this plan is. Here's how it could potentially impact West Lynch. And here's, if you're interested in it, this is what we could do in future years. Kind of thing. We can do it that way, just so that you guys have more information on it, so you can make an informed decision moving forward. Because yeah, it could have some big implications or it could have minor ones. So I think we just need more. What if you just forward that to us? We'll take a look at it, come with a report to council, and then you guys can decide at that point.
Yeah, because I know it did have some implications to even the development charges bylaw and stuff, and I don't know if that was considered back then. My understanding is all the municipalities were part of that plan, so I would imagine there'd be some history there to dig up.
Go ahead.
Billy, would you be averse to putting this in year 2 or year 3 as opposed to doing it this year?
Yeah, for sure, that would be fine, just to have on the agenda, on the horizon.
Just based on, I believe, Councillor Bailey, the funding was the County of Wellington Trail funding, I believe, and we were able to utilize that funding for a couple of trail projects at the township. In 2016, we utilized the funding for the Stokely Trail that was constructed, and then in 2020, we utilized that funding for the Fox Run Park accessible walking trail. I believe that funding is no longer available because we did utilize our full portion, but I'm not 100% sure if that's the same funding that you're referring to.
Yeah, I think that was part of it, or it was a partner with the plan. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Move on to number 18, it's greater involvement with economic development initiatives. That's Councillor Goyda.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that this needs to be a huge undertaking. I guess my thought on it was that economic development for the most part takes place at the county level. And there's a lot of initiatives that are taking place. For instance, I can take, and this is maybe more so because in my restaurant job days, the county was often involved with various initiatives, the Taste Real initiative that they had going on. They had some maps of the various local businesses that you could look at, visit. And aside from that, they have a Bible. They have lots of different programs going on that here at this council we're not always aware of are taking place. And I wasn't sure if at the county there was like an economic development committee where there was like a person from each municipality that participated in that committee. And if not, if we could have somebody sort of designated to that, or even a simpler idea would maybe be just to have a representative from the economic development department come and provide some updates once or twice a year, so that we kind of know what the initiatives are and how we can sort of implement those within our own township, and just maybe sparks other discussions and ideas. So it wasn't intended to be, let's start a whole economic development initiative. It was more just to try to tap into the work that's already being done.
Sure, I can speak to that. Yes, there is a committee at the staff level around the county. And generally, those that participate in it are aware the local member municipality has their own economic development staff, and they sit on those committees. We don't have any, so that falls to me. So I've sat in where possible, and unfortunately, I think since I've been here, I've sat in on maybe 3 of those meetings. Just scheduling wise, it just doesn't work. I can continue to try to do that, but I agree with your suggestion of maybe quarterly having one of the county economic development coordinators who also participates in those meetings, have them come here and give council an update, and then that would be pretty, and the local community can be in touch with it that way too. I think that would be a very good idea. We could definitely make that request to the county.
Yeah, and there's also the Economic Development Committee from the county elected officials, and I'm sure Yana would be more than happy to come down here quarterly and engage this council. They do a lot of good work, so I don't see any hesitation in that happening now.
So just a comment, we had previous 2 terms ago, we had somebody come from the county and give an update of where they are type of thing. And at that time, the push was to get our industrial labs more visibility type of thing. And so I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, it's all encompassing. It's right down to the farmers market, tastes real, and they do quite a bit of work there. So, Mr. CEO, you'll be able to schedule that early or whatever. Yeah. It's still yours, Councilor Friday. Identifying additional ones in my yours. All right. Any further comments from Councilor Goydes? That could be a year 1, obviously, right? Yes. Right, Councilor Willis.
Yes, this comes from, it doesn't seem to be like we have enough engagement on the tools that we currently have. We have engaged Bushland. I give the example of the playground areas that we put in here, supposed to put in here, we supposed to put in Orange Park. We've had less than 20 people for those 2 activities. One of the suggestions that came up, and Councilor Boyd and I went to Orange Park to hear them out. Was a good idea. There's an issue specifically with the park. Why don't you put a sign up, say, visit, engage Bushland today, similar like a severance sign. You know, you see a severance sign or rezoning sign by the road, something like that would be beneficial. The other thing is, I think you covered it up last meeting or the meeting before. I'm suggesting that we put a flyer in with the Sky Bill and the justice. Please be aware that we have all these other means of engagement, engage with Lynch, sign up for a media blast. We have all those opportunities. I don't think people are aware of that. So that's basically just making them aware of the tools that we have and reaching out when there's a specific issue on a particular property. Let's do something with it.
Absolutely, we definitely can do that. They're definitely good tools, and it's building up so that, like you said, so people can become aware of them. And the more they become aware of them, the more that they'll get utilized, and the more things we can get there. So for sure, we can add a sign that's a great idea. We can put notices in, like you mentioned too, that those are definitely things that we could incorporate.
Comments from members of council on that point? Mr. CEO, is this the now has been revised slightly too long.
Not for the whole term of council, no. If you were saying year one, yes.
Yeah.
But for the term of council, no, I think that's fine. We have a better understanding now of what we weren't sure of. So yeah, we can move forward with that and bring the overall plan back to you. That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for the input and for getting this stuff done for you.
You don't need any more clarification on the second home or some resources.
So what we'll do then is, if we say that, yes, we understand it, but no, there's not enough funds available, you'll see most of those are in years 2, 3, or 4. So what we'll do then when we're bringing forward the budget for that time is say, this was identified as a goal. We've now quantified it further. For you to achieve this, it's going to cost X, and that would be a specific budget request at that time. And then you can decide at that time if you wanted to incorporate in the budget for that year or not.
Just had a question. So throughout the last few years of using the Engage Plus Lynch platform, I know there's been resident comments or suggestions, whether they were anonymous or not, but is there a way that we've tracked some of those suggestions or goals that maybe residents have suggested? And we can take a look at them.
I can't speak to that, Jeff. Just put you on the spot. Sorry, do you have
Through you, Chair, they've been tracked through reporting to council. Where they have not been tracked in a dedicated form is for future use. So if it's been presented to council as a result of a engagement that we've undertaken, that has been presented, but not long-term. Here's a consolidated list of ideas that it's also there, but it's not being put together.
I'm just thinking we've now got the Engage Plus Lynch for our budget. And sometimes people will answer all the questions, but then there's room for comment, which is often really valuable, kind of raw information that wasn't being asked of them. They're wondering, and sometimes those are really good comments. And I would love to see some of them thinking, oh, wow, like 20 people have said we should maybe think about this. And then maybe as council, that should be something we should be thinking about.
Sure. Perhaps what we could do is with staff, we're still capturing that. We just haven't been reporting in the format like you're mentioning. Perhaps what we can do is then on an annual basis, when we're coming up with the work plan for that year, is to say, okay, over the past year, here's a list of items that the public has commented on in terms of, in general terms. Would you like this included in the coming year's work plan? I think we could provide something like that.
It would be great.
I don't just know. I didn't say that we didn't provide that information to for next year. So when again, it would go to the appropriate staff. But it's no while enough to get the impression that those reports are just given to council. All that feedback is provided to be appropriate. But to the CA's point, future reporting.
Further was report.
So report ADM 2023-002, current goals and objectives from council received as information, and that council is for staff to incorporate the goals and objectives as correctly and assign timing into in terms of term of the council work plan, as well as an annual corporate work plan for the term of council, and further that staff be directed to incorporate the necessary funding in the applicable budget years consideration as necessary to the council agree upon goals and objectives.
Do we have a mover already? We do not. All right, we're gonna move to that, please. Councilor Smollett, second by Councilor Hurst. Right, last chance, any comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. All right, on to 933. This my box.
So this report is to present the council the agreement with County of Wellington for the lease of library space as it relates to the Coastal Society. That report ADM 2023-003 entitled Agreement with County of Wellington lease of library space for the Coastal Historical Society be received, and council give 3 readings. The bylaw 2023-003 being a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute the renewal agreement with County of Wellington at the new lease limit.
Councilor Goyda. Second by Councilor Taylor. All right, questions, comments?
I'll just make it. I just wanted to, I know this is for the lease, but I think it's good timing to just thank the Westland Historical Society for all the work that they're doing in there. When I went in on a Saturday, John Clark was in there working away, doing his thing, and Marjorie's very, very active. So that group of volunteers, I think, should be thanked, and I'm pretty sure they're going to start to get pretty busy for the next little while. And I would just encourage anyone to go to the website. They're always looking for members or volunteers or donations of books or maps or diaries or anything that, is pertinent to Westland. So, thanks to that group. All of you.
All in favor? Security. Correspondence. Council reports.
Should we, consent, we haven't done those yet, right? Just read it to the last meeting, that's right.
Let's go with that. Your mind will consider. I going to read it. I do. I must be received. Gonna move for that, please. Second by Councilor Hurst. Anybody have any items they want removed? March 6.5, Max Snyder. That's there. So we'll receive the remainder. The other ones from council members. Okay, all in favor to receive the remainder. Councilor Wilson. Just 1 second. Sorry, pardon me, all sorry. All in favor of receiving those remainder ones? Now we're on 6.5.
Yeah, basically respond to our consultant, critique of their report. All I want to do is just part of this for future, when the annual report comes back from Snyder, so this will be brought forward at that time as well. I just don't want the consultants to keep referring this back to our consultant and back and forth. And we're not going to accomplish anything. So all I'm saying is take this report. When the annual report comes in from the gravel pit operator, let's bring this back out again and go at it again.
Okay. Yeah, that. Okay, you move for that. Councilor Moses, secondary. Councilor Hurst, comments? All in favor? We're at council. Correspondence. To know there's a resolution. All right, council reports. I reached out to the University of Guelph presidents to have kind of an introductory / high level meeting. And so Mr. CAO, myself, and our Wellington County representative, Councillor Ballmer, will be having a meeting February 3rd. Around there. Anyways, just to engage the university on their plans for the Mill Creek property. Post extractive use and any policy direction they have on any other of their lands within townships. So essentially this is just the forming council and hopefully you don't have objections to the three of us engaging the university. Again, this is going to be a pretty high level, 45 minutes, with a high level conversation with them. And hopefully start building the relationship. I don't really know anybody out there in their major area producer here in the township, so we get to start forming those connections.
Councilors, has the university provided any indication what their property is? Like slate?
I've heard rumors, but why I'd like to start engaging and find out if there's any plans. Mr. Mr. CEO was shaking his head no to get university.
It's not a minute, it'll take us February 2nd.
Just Barry was saying earlier with respect to influencing what they have time for rehabilitation. To give you an end to say, yeah, we are interested and we'd like to participate in the.
Is there anything else? So I need to move now. Any council members have any updates?
I have one small one, when Christine Reed from State Communities delegated early in the year or last year. She had mentioned that, one of the things that each of the groups has to do is submit an action plan. And so I just wanted to thank Nicole, who's on our committee. She submitted that yesterday. So we have
Just for giving you reminders. AF and HR, Min Finance and Human Resources of the county. The committee was yesterday, Tuesday. And the county budget as proposed has now made it through all the committees. As far as I know, no changes. So that means the county budget should come in around 3.8%. Ultimate approval is slated for the end of the month. So that's good news. I feel that both the municipal staff and the county staff did an excellent job on the budgets and in this challenging time. We say that every year, Mr. CEO. It seems like it's something new rises every year, but yeah, the inflation pressures this year were extraordinary. So pretty happy with the budget up there. They've really pushed the numbers and a reasonable amount as far as I'm concerned. So.
Mr. Mayor, can you comment on what other municipalities are under in terms of increases?
Well, they did read off some, they were using other county specific budgets and they ranged from 7% all the way up to 12%. So I don't remember the specific one, but Mayor White had a list there. And there wasn't a fear tactic or anything like that. It was just an indication of the work that's been done up in the county and here at the township. So I'm sure it's available for you.
Get a feel for how well we're doing.
Yeah,
we're doing very well at hard times, and then it's all kudos to staff.
Now they have a few outstanding items that are in negotiations with some labor groups that could have affected, but I mean, that's not going to be a 2% hit or anything like that on the budget. Yeah. And I was mentioning, they got some really good amounts for their trucks at auction. So I think we've been seeing some of that benefit as well. So that helped the bottom line. I think we need a resolution.
The council received the mayor's and council member updates.
Can move that, please. Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Carried. Bylaws, Mr. Fox.
The following bylaws may be read, finally passed in the open council. Bylaw 3002, a bylaw to provide for HR tax levy for the 2023 and the collection thereof. Bylaw 2023, a bylaw authorizing entry into an agreement with the county of Wellington for an elite states of the Social Service Society. Bylaw 2023-005, a bylaw to appoint members to the Committee of Adjustment, Planning and Development Advisory Committee and Farming Standards Committee. Bylaw 2023-006, the bylaw to appoint members to the Recreation Advisory Committee. Bylaw 2023-007, bylaw to appoint members to the Heritage Advisory Committee. And finally, bylaw 2023-008, a bylaw to appoint members to the Youth Advisory Committee.
Excellent. And please. Hurst, I think the council was in favor. Carried. Announcements. Let's make it part of the public record. Mr. Bond, this is your last day at this township. We're sorry to see you go, but as we discussed at your work station there the other day, I'm proud of you. Your career is advancing and it's short. It wasn't that short. A couple of years, 2 years. Right. I was always impressed with the way you present the council, being I like to do, but well and very professional and that, and you always have a smile on your face. You're a great asset and good luck in your future endeavor. And you're not too far away. You can always come back. Thank you so much. Any other announcements?
I'm just going back to reports,
The budget report.
and yeah, the financial report. I don't think we discussed the Cambridge fire contract. I just think Mary might need some direction from council.
So what are our options, Mrs. Sand, for the Cambridge fire? Is there any options?
Yeah. Not gonna talk.
I don't believe that there were any options noted in the report because those options were provided to council at the last council meeting.
I'll just query this with the councilors. Councilors,
I thought about it and I said to myself, well, okay, we're targeting the area that people live around Passage Lake and live on Townline Road. You know, if I was somebody living on the lake, I think I would appreciate more a grant to clean up the lake rather than reducing my tax bill by a few dollars type of thing. So since we agreed that we're not going to provide a grant because of the fact that we're concentrating on making the lake more accessible to the rest of the community, I don't think we should do it this year. We're in a tight budget situation. We put some money out to pay for a full-time operator. I think we can consider next year, but not this year.
Councilor Bailey?
Thank you. I brought up an option at the last meeting. Cutting to the chase, it worked out to about a $5,000 contribution this year, which I don't think is too crazy. Then I did see it looked like there was another option in some of the council questions and staff responses. And I don't know who had submitted that, but maybe they can speak to that contribution.
Well, you speak to it right now.
I don't know how to explain it. Someone had suggested reducing the contribution to the asset management reserve by $11,410 and redirect those tax levy contributions to the operating budget for Cambridge Fire. Whereas my option was, and I think this was before I came on, but I think the decision was to try to bring the contribution to 50% by 2024. However, COVID's kind of delayed a few years in there. So then my thinking was if we continued with what we had already agreed upon by doing 50% by 2026, then I think Mary had confirmed that the contribution would be $5,705 each year until we get to 2026. So I was proposing that option.
Which one? 5,000.
Yeah.
So you're putting that on the table.
Yes.
As a mover, can I get a second for that, please? Yeah, we know your position.
If you want my support on this, I'm going to suggest that we relook at the Heritage Committee members, 2 members going to the National Conference. We only have 1 returning member. So you're looking at 4 new members, and I don't think that the appropriate to have new members. So that's $3,300 you can save, put toward that if you want. And the other option is the landscaping paid for out of the surplus funds. So that will free up about $6,000. So I can support it. We sort of do a trade off of everything. I just don't want to increase anymore.
So you're saying you're not supportive of it?
I'm supportive of it if we do a trade-off by eliminating the transferring the funds allocated for the National Historical and then taking the landscaping funding out of the surplus funds.
So that's going to open a can of worms because right now we're discussing proposals. So
I understand what you're saying. Do you want a straight answer?
I want a straight answer. But I appreciate the justification because then to go down your road, we're going to have to do reconsideration and it's going to open more. So right now, Councilor Bailey, you're supportive of it.
Supportive of my own motion, yes.
Not really.
Gosh, I'm torn on this one. I think given the circumstances, I can see the merit of pushing it out a year. And then I go back to my comments initially with multi-conservation and you need to make, inspired decisions. So I think I'm in support of Councilor Bailey's motion to stretch that out over a number of years to meet the obligation.
$5,000 for till 26.
It should be so 3 fiscal periods.
3 fiscal periods. Is the motion, right, John?
That's my understanding. I was going based on what had been decided in the past and it said to 2020. But we haven't contributed in 2 years, so that's why I was just adding another 2 years. So I would imagine 2023,
Or,
yeah, 3, 4,
and that will get us 50%, and this is,
by 2027.
and this is, a done deal.
Yeah.
And I know what Councilor Chris, or, okay, because she, maybe because it wasn't clear.
We're assuming it's a done deal, but we know that the residents want it all. So I know our objective was to 50%, so at least we're meeting our objective.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Yours.
I'm supportive of stretching it out over subsequent years. If that's the objective, then we should endeavor to meet that objective. As long as it's not financially paralyzing, which I don't view it as, but I take direction from others as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Councilor Bailey, alluded to a question that was asked in the question and answers. That was my question. I had posed the question regarding the increase in the OCI funding. If we could use some of that towards the phasing in of the Cambridge Fire Service, which we had a separate discussion about that earlier, and we have elected to put that to the Brown Road discretionary reserve instead, which I support, and I don't want to now go back to that because I am in full support of that. I would like to recognize, though, however, that council did make a commitment several years back now that we would phase in the Cambridge Fire Service to the 50% mark. And I know that we said 2024, but you know, COVID happened and derailed the train per se. And you know, I hate to keep pushing it off. I think inflation is an equally big hindrance to be able to do that. We agreed in this meeting today to add in a full-time operator, which to me, it kind of goes hand in hand. It's another safety component. And to me, that is a priority. But that's not to say I don't want to continue phasing in the Cambridge Fire Service amount to that 50% to follow through on the commitment that we already made. I agree with Councilor Zakulis. I don't want to stretch things any further in this budget year. And so I don't think I would support Councilor Bailey's recommendation of the 5,000 this year. However, I would like to, I guess, double it up in the next budget year. I don't know if I can even be saying that as part of when there's a motion on the table, but my preference would be to allocate the 11,410 that I had inquired about in these questions in our next year's budget.
I think I can get this done.
Okay, I had a question for clarification, but I'm just trying to understand, is the motion on the floor for inclusion in the 23 budget or 24, 25, 26?
It was for 23, 24, 25, 26. I think it's
4 years. It's 3 years. 23, 24, 25. 5 years. Right?
Maybe Mary can confirm what the calculation was. I thought it was for 4 years.
My question just, if this is what the request is, then is this an amendment to the budget that you just looked at today, or how would that be funded?
Yeah, like it's because we missed it in the first report. So this is gonna be a base budget increase of $5,000. Yeah. So we're going from 4.39 plus. Like what? Percent.
So my suggestion would be, I know you had something, maybe this is what council wants to achieve by the time frame. Maybe like the comment was maybe put in 2 next year, and we don't have to change any of this year's budget, and then you can still achieve it in the time frame you're looking. It's the operating, but
$5,000 is not gonna break the bank, and it's gonna tell the people that are advocating for this, we're doing some movement, so for me, I'm supportive of the 5,000 per year, each year until it's paid off, whatever it's 3 or 4. But also that I don't want to revisit this until the end of that, and then we've made our commitment at 50%. And then in the next term of council, that'll bring us to the end of this term of council, then they can, maybe the economic situations change, the inflationary pressures have changed. They can review whether they want to go beyond the 50%, but right now we have to focus on other pressures. And so we're doing our part to get to our commitment. So that's kind of where I'm at.
so the direction to staff then would be to, if council passes this, to incorporate the 5 for 23. And then just incorporate that into the final budget that'll be presented.
Yes, and then each year,
In the following years until that 50% is achieved.
so every budget we're gonna see going forward is gonna have another $5,000 on top of this year's.
Yeah.
Is that the intent of this?
Yeah.
So how do you capture the her resolution? Big sword, no. This is gonna go out.
Just Ann, is that correct?
So what I've heard is that council supporting phasing in 5,000 into the operating budget for the Cambridge Fire Services contract each year until the full amount is in the operating budget. Is that what's happening?
So 50%, not 100% coverage, 50%.
So it's basically that 5,700 that you talked about, I believe at the last meeting, adding that to the 23 budget, 24 and 25.
I believe what Mary had told me was that in order to meet 50% of the total contract amount, we would need to add $5,705 each year.
You're gonna need to use terminology that she's used to using, sorry. You need a base budget increase each year in 23, 24, 25 of $5,700. Because you can't just carry the 5,000 this year. It's 5,000 this year, then that ends up being 10,000 next year and 15,500. Is that right?
Base budget increase of 55,705. I'm using her numbers.
Your numbers are right. It's
So-
the terminology that we just got.
Yeah. And then that would get it to the goal of 50% by 2026. So I'm not clear if that means that needs to be included in the 2026 budget, or if that meant 23, 24, 25 would get us to 50% by 2026. That I'm not.
Does that make sense, Mrs. Stan? Or is it
Yes, I'm just
agreed?
double checking my numbers really quickly. Thank you.
These were as long as I can change.
Yes, I agree with that, Councillor Bailey. So it'd be 5705 per year from 2023 to 2026, and that would get us to 50% of the contract costs.
That's what you moved.
Yeah.
And was seconded by.
Me.
That was not a real enthusiastic me. Only power discussions. I guess it's gonna be all in favor. It's 3 and opposed. 2. So that's great. That brings us back down to. confirmation. Right, confirmatory bylaw. All right, the following bylaw be taken read three times and finally passed to the council. Bylaw 3004 being a bylaw confirmed the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Whistling as being held on the 18th day of January 2023. Second, Councilor Boyle, all in favor? Carried, and then the last one, adjournment, please. Council hereby adjourns at 1:38. Councilor Bailey, Councilor Boyle, all in favor? Carried.